Hi there, and welcome to another edition of Mamas in Miami, where together we're navigating motherhood and parenthood together with fierce love and unwavering solidarity of one another. I say parenthood now, no longer motherhood, because we've got so many dads following us. And at this time, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for the support you're showing our platform. Lizzie and I are so excited that you guys are just so into this, just as we are. We're having so much fun putting these topics out there, and we're so humbled that you guys are taking the time to listen. I wanted to remind you guys that if there's ever a story or if there's ever a personal journey that you wanted to share with us, please DM us. We would love to have you on and have all topics discussed. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and invite my bestie, Sofia Holtzman. She's actually a mama from my tribe. We've been raising our kids together since day one. I'm dedicating the whole week to her because she's got such an amazing story, and it never gets old listening to it. I actually have a box of Kleenex here with me because no matter how many times we talk about it, we always break down in tears. So without further ado, let me invite Sofia Holtzman. Hi,
Hello.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. You had a workout?
Uh, Not this
Uh,
morning. Got my nails done.
oh, well, that's a change for you.
I know, right? I know.
Well, thank you for joining us today and sharing your story for the world.
Of course. Anytime.
Soph, I've known you probably my entire adult life. I only wish I knew you as a teenager and as a kid because you and I have had just way too much fun together. You're part of my personal tribe. We've been raising our kids together since in utero. Why don't you go ahead and
Yeah.
give everybody a brief bio of yourself?
Well, I am a mom of three. My husband and I, Ryan, have been together, God, for about 20 years since FSU. And you and I met when I worked with your husband, Danny. We were partners. And actually, Ryan and Danny have known each other since third grade. So we go way back, way back.
Way back.
Yeah.
And if you had told us each at each other's weddings when we had first met each other that we
Yeah.
would be raising our kids about like 2 minutes apart from each other, literally because we are neighbors,
Yeah.
and that we'd be raising these kids, with on vacations together and holidays together. I mean, who would have thought?
Everything. Well, we can't do anything without the kids asking, are we doing New Year's this year with them? Are we doing? So it's like they plan our
They
lives, they
really,
plan our social
they
lives. So
really do. Well, for those of you that don't know Sophia, Sophia has three kids, but her twins are miracles beyond miracles. Miracles beyond
they are.
miracles. And we are not going to be able to touch up on her NICU story until Thursday, which is why I'm dedicating this whole week to Sophia's story. Because the NICU journey alone will take up one entire episode. But
Yeah.
Sophia's amazing because she's always been extremely open about her IVF journey. And IVF is something that I don't understand why people do not like to talk about until their kids are way old enough. And oh yeah, I went through
Yeah.
infertility. Oh yeah, I went through IVF. But Sophia was always from the very beginning so open about her journey, and she would tell anybody who would ask with
Yeah.
no shame to it. So she was the first person I turned to when I knew I wanted to do a topic episode about IVF.
Yeah.
And her story alone is just like, so without further ado, so let's go to the very beginning. Once you and Ryan got married, how soon did
Mhm.
you start trying for children?
I would say it was probably like 2 years. We got married young. Like I said, we met at FSU. I was 25 when we got married, so we definitely wanted to wait and travel and do all of that stuff. But I would say it was probably about 2 years, and I had this, vision that everybody has where, you start trying and maybe it takes a couple months and you're pregnant. And it didn't happen right away. So I started kind of asking my OB, and because I was still young, there was no cause for concern. So they were like, no, just wait, be patient. You've been on the pill. And me being the not patient
Right.
person was like, okay, we've been trying, we've been waiting this long. And it was probably about 2 years before we're like, okay, something needs to kind of change, because I wasn't willing to just continue and continue and continue. And so that was kind of, it was probably 2 years that we were like, okay, let's start having conversations about trying something different. And we did. I mean, we tried the metformin and we tried the Clomid, but Clomid just didn't work at all.
Fertility. Right.
Exactly. So usually you start with metformin first, and that's a drug that they give diabetics also, and I didn't know it at the time, but they do. Yeah, they do. And so you start with metformin, and then you kind of go to Clomid, which is the next step. And neither one of those works. So they're like, okay, at this point, you need to go see a fertility doctor. And like I said, it was probably about 2 years. But they did notice that I was starting to kind of have like polyps in my ovaries and stuff, which is weird because a lot of times that's hereditary. And my mom never had an issue. She got pregnant right away when her and my dad got married. And so this was all brand new to me, to my mom, to my family. It was like, what's going on kind of thing. So.
And at some point, did they ever question whether it was your husband, Ryan?
They did, and I believe that they did test him once we did go to the fertility doctor, because those are obviously rounds of tests that they do before you get into full-blown IVF. So once we did transfer to the fertility doctor, then it was now the round of testing for me and for Ryan, and then kind of the next steps of what we would have to do with all the treatment process.
So you start going to see a fertility specialist at the 2-year mark of having been trying to have a baby.
Yeah, roughly. And I, I didn't know anything about IVF. I was like, oh, great. They're just going to like do these. I'm going to have to take a lot of medicine, and they're going to start these treatments, and then I'm going to get pregnant right away. I didn't realize that in and of itself is a huge, long process. Especially because you do have to do several rounds of testing before you even start any of the fertility treatments. Like you said, you have to test if it's your husband, if there's anything wrong with me. And then once all of that is ruled out, then they kind of, I remember they sit down with you, at least in his office, they sat down and it was like, okay, this is the plan. This is the treatment plan. This is the calendar. They bring out a calendar, and I'm like, what the hell? What do you mean a calendar? And it's just, everything is so pre-programmed to the day, to the hour sometimes, of different medications that you have to take to get to the process of the retrieval and everything that's involved with it.
So it's not an overnight cure fixed.
No. And I always told anybody that asked, this is not a romantic, fun, you and your spouse will not be connecting in any way at all. I mean, it's to me, it was like, this is my job, this is a business, this is what I'm going to do, and I have to follow the
Not
rules.
connecting, just injecting.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. There's no romance involved whatsoever.
You sit down at your first appointment, and what can you expect? That pull out a calendar type thing?
No, I mean, it's a lot of questions, just like when you sit down with your OB, right? They ask you a lot of questions, but once you start ruling, and a lot of it, that's really easy, right? You just answer the questions and whatever. But once you get to the sit down, okay, like, you guys are fine. We've realized that there's nothing kind of catastrophic going on. You guys can continue with the IVF process, the two of you, and not discussing surrogacy or, any donation, whether it's, egg donation or sperm donation. Once you kind of get past that process, then it's okay, here's the calendar. And oh, by the way, you need to have a custody agreement. So, which I had, this was the first time. So we sit down, all the paperwork, and they have everything, the cost and everything involved. And then they're like, okay, and here's the custody agreement. We're like, what is that? Well, when you have embryos that are now made, they're basically considered children. And you need to decide, okay, in the event of a divorce, what happens to those embryos if you have any embryos that are frozen. So we had to kind of discuss that. And, at how old was I? 28, 29. It was like,
You were a baby.
okay, fine, whatever. And you just, and by the way, it was a decision that we made on the spot. It wasn't something that they said, okay, next week you're going to have to decide this, do you want to have the embryos frozen? Do you want to have the embryos, frozen for eternity kind of thing? Do you want to destroy them? Do you want to donate them to science? So these were all like on the spot decisions that we made. And I was like, what the hell?
And the last thing
okay.
assumed you would be doing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Didn't occur to me.
So the first meeting was more of a consult with your doctor.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you? My intake form.
Right.
Then he sends tons of blood work, correct?
Tons of blood work. I remember once I was in the IVF process, I was pretty much going to the doctor. It was probably like every morning, every day, pulling blood work, getting results. We had to do genetic testing, obviously. But that's why I said there's no romance involved in any of this. This is, I tell people, if they would have had me drink like shakes with disgusting ingredients in it, I would have been like, all right, well, it is what it is. So
mention that whether or not internally you were anxious or depressed or whatever, you never let on to it to those people closest to you, because I never would have known. You are such a matter-of-fact person that I could get a good read on you during that whole process. But internally, were you frustrated? Were you upset? Were you anxious? Were you depressed? You're also drinking so much medication and hormones that your emotions must have been everywhere.
Well, if you were to ask Ryan, he would probably tell you that I was psycho throughout the whole thing. No, I mean, I was also working at the time. So, I was seeing clients, and I was going to county commission meetings, and that's what I had to do. I would go to the doctor in the morning, pull blood, and then continue on my day. I didn't have time to really think about any of that. It was stressful because, you had to stick to the calendar. And I remember that I had a client that was flying into town, and there's a point in the IVF process where they tell you, okay, you're going to have your egg retrieval on this day, and literally you have to have your calendar open for that couple of days prior to that. And there's a particular medication that you have to inject at the moment that they call you to say, okay, your retrieval is going to be on this day, inject the medicine right now. And once you inject that, then you must come in, tomorrow or whatever the day was. I had a client coming in town for a meeting, and I was like, oh, you have to be kidding me. And I had to call him, and I didn't tell him why. I was like, oh, I'm having a medical procedure. It's an emergency, whatever. And it was awful. But emotionally, like I said, I mean, you just do it. Luckily, my doctor was also into holistic medicine. So he recommended that I do acupuncture, which I recommend acupuncture to anyone having fertility issues, because they specifically treat that area, I guess you would say, the abdomen area. And there was a time where I was going almost every day to go do these treatments. So that helped a lot.
So you're injecting yourself, you're seeing the acupuncturist. This is all prior to your egg retrieval?
So this was all prior to the egg retrieval. And then because the acupuncturist worked with my doctor, she came at the egg retrieval. She did a session at the doctor. And then when they did the transfer, the actual embryo transfer, she was there at the office, and I did a treatment right after the transfer as well. So
when I didn't get the chance to ask you at your first document, I'm sure you talked about finances and what this costs and what you can expect if insurance covers. Can you share more or less for somebody who's interested in IVF, what that looks like for them? Because I'm sure that takes a lot of preparation too, monetarily.
For sure. So the twins are 11 now. I'm sorry, I don't know if I
I
spoiled
forgot
anything, but
that
they're
part.
11. And so this was 11 years ago.
Yeah.
And at the time, our insurance didn't cover anything. And I don't know that it's changed much since then. Um, I don't remember if I don't think we had like a budget in mind, right? Ryan and I, it wasn't like, okay, if this costs X amount, we can't do it. It was like, well, this is what we're gonna do, and we're just gonna figure it out. Um, I don't know. I believe some insurances have kind of changed their policies now, but I think in general, it's like if I can go on like a policy thing, I think it's unfortunate that insurance companies do not cover treatment like this because it is a legitimate health issue that women do have. And I think it's becoming more and more common. So I do wish that insurance companies would cover a portion, if not all of it, because they cover other things that, in my opinion, maybe shouldn't be covered or more of a want versus a need. Um, but I remember it just kind of being like, okay, the cost is going to be the cost. And I want to say it was anywhere between 20 and 30,000 at the time. And really the bulk of it were the medications, how expensive those medications were.
And that was 11 years ago. So, I mean, that
Right.
number has to be today, based just on alone when we had Anivan Gutierrez, who actually went internationally for
Yeah.
surrogacy and egg donation and whatnot. And his was over $100,000, I believe. We have
Yeah, I believe it.
we had a question, and before it goes up in the scroll, Annie MDS wants to know, in what ways does the acupuncture help?
So number one, relaxation. I mean, just in general, everybody knows that acupuncture helps to relax. But because they were targeting a specific area, they were bringing blood flow to that area, and they were just allowing the process to, I guess, happen, right? Because you're targeting that particular area, and it's just like acupuncture with any other. When back pain or anything else, you bring blood flow to that area, and it helps. I will say that I did do IVF. I didn't just do one round. And since we're on the acupuncture topic, I will say that I ended up doing 3 rounds of IVF. The first round was more of an IUI, which it wasn't full blown IVF, where it was the egg transfer and the retrieval, and it was more like an insemination. That didn't work. So when I went to the second kind of, you know, stage, which was full blown IVF, I ended up having to do 3 rounds. Now, I didn't do 3 rounds of the egg retrieval because luckily I was able to produce enough of the eggs to retrieve. But my first round of IVF, I did get pregnant. They ended up transferring 2 embryos. I got pregnant and lost them right away at 6 weeks. So, and I did acupuncture throughout that. The second time I did the treatment, I only had 4 embryos left. And I'm sorry, I had 2 embryos left. They were my last embryos. And so I decided at the time, I was like, you know what? I don't want to stress out. I'm not going to do acupuncture. I don't want to spend the money. I'm just going to wing it and kind of just do the meds and do the transfer. And midway through the transfer, they realized that because I did not do acupuncture, the lining in my uterus did not develop proper. It didn't develop thick enough for the transfer. So
Wow.
my doctor was like, "Well, did you do acupuncture?" And I said, "No, I just wanted to do nothing and see what happened." And he's like, "Well, you better do acupuncture again because we have to cancel this cycle and start over." And that was when I was doing it like every day.
Wow.
Um, and it ended up working. I got pregnant with the twins. And so I people that are like, "Oh, we're not going to do acupuncture. I'm a full on fan
Sure.
of acupuncture." So,
Yeah. So let's run numbers real quick, Sophia.
mm.
You have egg retrieval one, and how many eggs did you reduce from that?
So I had 20 eggs that I produced, 10 in each ovary. Um, and then from there, what they do is then they start testing them, making sure that they're all viable. And out of those 20, 10 eggs were viable to do the
So you
insemination. And
went
what they do,
to 10 for round,
mhm.
which was intrauterine.
This was after the IUI. This was the full blown IVF where they do the egg retrieval and the transfer and all of that.
Got it. So intrauterine is really, is it fair to say it's another form of just artificial insemination?
That's exactly, yeah. It's like
Okay.
imagine like
So,
yeah,
so
like,
for that, you're
yeah,
just inseminated with your husband's donation in a medical
exactly,
facility.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you wait, and then they see if it worked, and that's it.
That's number one. So number two
Hmm.
is, okay, let's go the IVF route. You do an egg
Hmm.
retrieval. You produce 20 eggs. Only 10 are viable.
Right.
What happens with 10?
So in my case, they took half and half, so 5 and 5, and imagine like two petri dishes is what it was described to me. And they took Ryan's sample, and with the first dish, they just kind of, this is going to get graphic, but they like squirted the sample in the dish, and they allowed the sperm to naturally go to the eggs and inseminate on their own. That's one dish. They take the other dish and they take each individual egg and they take the egg and actually inject the sperm into the egg and let it grow that way. And so then once they have those done, they let them grow essentially to 3 days, day 3. So from day one to day 3, then they see after that how many of those are actual embryos, have developed to embryos, and then in what condition they're in. Are those viable? And from those, I had, so from the 10, after they inseminated them, I had 7. And then from the 7, ultimately, they got to the day 3. And the doctor at day 3, and this is where I had my client come in, and I was like,
Mhm.
oh my God. They said, we're going to inseminate and we're going to do 2. And that was my choice to do 2. They gave me the option of doing 1 or 2. I decided to do 2. Knowing that I could possibly have twins, I could possibly have triplets or even quadruplets. So it was, who knew? When they took, and they basically they took out of that 7, the doctor chooses which ones he feels look the best at day 3. After that, after they took the 2, they had 4 left, and they let them grow to day 5. And once they hit day 5, that's the end of the growth, the natural growth. And then they see, okay, out of those that grew, it was 4 of them, and they froze those.
Okay. So 4 frozen.
Yes, actually, I'm sorry. I take that back. 2 were able to be frozen.
Which were Luke and
So
Gabrielle.
which were Luke and Gabrielle. So they implanted 2 into me.
That's called
I had
correct? When they're not
a
frozen.
transfer.
Okay.
Yes, a fresh transfer. They let the rest grow to day 5, and out of the rest that were left, only 2 were able to be frozen.
And you miscarried your first in vitro.
I miscarried the first one. It made it to day 6, or I'm sorry, to 6 weeks. And then we went to see if there was a heartbeat. There was no heartbeat. And so then obviously there was nothing left to do. Like I said, I went to do the second round, and they had to stop it midway through because my lining didn't develop thick enough to do that. And so then Ryan and I decided we were going to, since we only had 2 left, and we would have to make the decision, okay, if this doesn't work with these last 2, we're going to have to start all over with this process. We took a little bit of a break. We traveled and went to Costa Rica and, relaxed a little bit. And then we came back, and I was like, all right, now we're in this 100%. So
from the day you walked into that office to in vitro round number 3, which is where you got pregnant, what was the time?
I would say it's about 6 months that we waited.
Is that what you more or less had expected going into it, or no?
No, I thought I would go meet with the IVF doctor, and within 1 or 2 months, I would do this whole procedure, and then I would have kids. I would be pregnant. There would be no issue. That was the scenario in my head. But obviously, I would say it probably took about around a year for the whole process by the time I started to where I finally got pregnant with the twins.
So we're going to leave the twin story for when we speak again on Thursday.
Yeah.
But I mean, Sophia's story did not stop there by no means with her in vitro journey. Can you share with everybody without giving the whole story away? We could talk again on Thursday. At what week the twins were born?
Well, they were born at 24 weeks, which is, I was 6 months pregnant. And actually, I tell people 24 weeks, but that's the beginning of the 6th month. So I was nowhere near 7 months pregnant. It was literally like the first day of my sixth
And
month,
how long did they live in the NICU for?
121 days.
So we're going to get into all of that on Thursday.
Mm.
But Sophia mentioned she has three.
Yeah.
Had three. If anybody is wondering whether it's true or not, whether they say once you're not looking for it, it happens, Sophia is the ultimate story of that. Because why don't you go ahead and share with everybody? Not only is Cruz a miracle, but he's also
Yeah, so I obviously went through IVF. I never was pregnant naturally. I did not have any more embryos, because the twins were the last of the embryos that we had. And as far as Ryan and I were concerned, we were good. We had a boy, we had a girl. They were healthy, thank God. So we didn't want to kind of test the odds with everything that had happened. And we were good. COVID comes, and as we are outside in quarantine, not in quarantine, but in social distancing or whatever, we're planning our retirement. We're like, we're going to retire in Colorado. The twins are 8.
you come to visit me.
And we go to visit Christy and Danny in Colorado. And yes, I ended up getting pregnant, which I did not believe could happen. And the twins and Cruz are 8 years apart. He has completed our family. I did not think I could get pregnant naturally, and he was a full term, was the greatest pregnancy ever. At least the only one I that I experienced as a normal pregnancy. But yeah, he's great. He's 3 now. So
We mentioned that he is a rainbow baby, so you did get pregnant more
yeah.
than your own.
So I did about a year before, and I remember calling you, and I was like, you and I need to talk to somebody. I had already, obviously my family had known, but I didn't really want to say anything. And I was like, so you won't even believe what just happened to me. And you're like, what? Did you go shopping? Did you go? You're like, what? I was like, so I'm pregnant. And, so yeah, I was pregnant a year before that. I actually miscarried
You actually
like, it was around the 6,
told me
7 week mark.
you actually called to tell me I was pregnant.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And so I miscarried right away. And so at that time, it kind of like messed with us a little bit, because it's like, wow, I can get pregnant naturally. Is this supposed to, like, are we supposed to have a third, And so we kind of toyed around with that idea for a little bit. And when I didn't get pregnant again right away, we just kind of left it alone. We're like, whatever, if it happens, it happens. But according, to my doctor, he's like, look, women, their bodies change, obviously. And sometimes when you don't think that you can get pregnant or you have fertility issues, when you're younger, your body kind of regenerates itself. And that's why a lot of women, when they're older, get pregnant. And, women that had IVF, did IVF in the previous years, were able to get pregnant. So that's kind of what happened to me. And he was like, unless you want to have more kids, you either need to get on birth control or your husband needs to go to the doctor, because now's the time, girlfriend. So I was like, no, he's going to the doctor. We're good.
And that's how Cruz came into the world. He's a quarantine.
That's how Cruz came. He is. He is. And luckily at the time, it was all during COVID. Everybody was working Zoom. Everybody no one was going into the office. So any meetings that I had, it was from the head up. And I remember a client of mine had no idea, none whatsoever, that I was pregnant. I didn't tell anybody. And he calls me and he's like, did I just hit? I had just had Cruz like 4 hours before and I was feeling fine. He's like, are you in the hospital? I'm like, yes. He's like, did you just have a baby? Like, yeah. He's like, are you kidding me? You didn't tell. But it was fine. It was great.
You are not the first person I've spoken to that had a quarantine baby during COVID after
Mhm.
struggling with infertility. I know so many quarantine COVID babies, and I don't know if there's anything to do with us just being so relaxed and at home that all these babies
I don't
sprouted.
know.
New generation in our group that's growing up together of all these little
Yeah.
ones that were born during COVID. It's crazy.
Well, a good friend of ours got pregnant in Colorado too. Don't go to Colorado, people, if
Yeah,
you're not
it's
wanting
that
to.
scene there for all of our friends out there
Oh,
in the
Lord.
Bay. Well, that's all the time we have for this segment with you today. But I did want to ask you the question, if anybody is struggling, why do you think it is so taboo in today's world to talk about in vitro and educate ourselves? And it's such a common thing that nobody talks about.
I don't know. Maybe it's a generational thing where people just grow up thinking, that it's not something to talk about, or even just infertility in general. Like, I remember, like, my great grandmother would say, well, if it's not meant to be, then maybe you're not meant to have children. Or, people might think that it's unnatural or for religious. I don't know. I don't know, or maybe just privacy. But for me, like, I'm always one to talk about it. For me, I think that it's important to give people hope. And I always tell people, the way that things are nowadays, if you want to have kids, you can have kids, whether it's through surrogacy, whether it's through adoption, any sort of donation. Like, you shouldn't let that stop you. You don't even have to be married nowadays. I mean, there's so many single women that are freezing their eggs and going through this process. And, I don't think that anything like that should stop you. I think that you should make the decision that's best for you. And if there's anybody that you can talk to about it, then you should absolutely do that. And if there's anybody that I can help, you should absolutely do that as well, because I didn't have that. Like, my mom, even to this day, is like, I don't know how this happened with you, because I didn't have any problems, and it's not something that ran in my family. Um, so I didn't have anybody. It was just me and Ryan at 29 years old going through this.
Not only that, so we were still the BlackBerry era where there wasn't
Yeah.
really social media. I mean, I think Facebook was like the most popular thing out there apart from Google. Where did you go to search for research 11 years ago? Because today the
Mhm.
world's your oyster. Go online and you could just even chat GBT it. Where did you
Yeah.
search?
I didn't. I actually had a friend who's in the same industry as I am, who was also having fertility issues, and she and I are still close. And she was like, "Look, if you need a doctor, I've vetted them all. I've gone to multiple doctors. I've had several rounds of treatment, and this is the guy." And so I trusted her, and it kind of went from there. But other than that, she was the only person that I knew that was even going through this.
So it was
You know,
word of mouth and somebody who was just willing to open up to you.
exactly, exactly.
Well, what a different world we're living in, and it's only been 11 years, right?
I know. I know. It's really crazy. I mean, the things that they test for now, I mean, it's not even just genetic things. They could test for, obviously they test for gender, but they test for hair color and eye color and all of these things, which that was all brand new at the time. And my doctor was like, I don't recommend you do that. The more you poke the embryo, that could damage it. So, but they do all kinds of things now.
Did
So,
you know the genders of the twins before? No, right? But you could have tested
mm-mm.
for.
Yes, we could have, definitely.
Oh my God.
And we didn't care. We
No,
didn't
I
care.
know. And we'll get all into the
Yeah.
on Thursday. It's a story you guys do not want to miss. When I tell you that they are miracle babies, they were born. Tell us real quickly their weight. So,
So they were born at 24 weeks, like I said, and they were both 1 pound, 6 ounces and 12 inches
yeah.
each.
So we're gonna get into all of that
Yeah.
on Thursday, right? Extinguish our little virtual tribal fire that we have here. Everybody keep your coffee very strong and your sanity intact until we meet again on Thursday. Thanks so
Thank you.
soon. Bye.